Hello? Ethan here is 34 years old. I recently underwent the most difficult and surprising divorce with Olivia, my 32-year-old ex-wife. Married for 5, we had been together for almost 10 years, and I felt we had everything sorted out. Then suddenly, though, Olivia filed for divorce. She departed without requesting alimony, simply grabbed a large chunk of money, and vanished. I was astonished. Olivia was not the kind to walk away from readily. She was not someone who would just toss everything away after so many years. I tried to first defend it. She was simply unhappy, I persuaded myself. Maybe I missed the indicators. Deep down, though, I sensed something was wrong. I disagreed with my companions when they started implying that the narrative might have further layers. I refused to consider the likelihood that something more evil was underfoot. Too much suffering to even think about. A few weeks following the divorce, my mother sent me a call inviting me to their Christmas celebration, a major event in our family. This was the one time of year everyone got together. Then, though, my mother said something that really rocked me. Olivia would be here. I froze. Given everything that has lately happened, why would she be invited to a family get-together? My dad waved it aside and replied, "It's the right thing to do," when I asked about it. She's family. That seemed too distanced, too practiced. It felt as though I was missing something I should have known. Though my doubts were mounting, I chose to attend the party as I could just ignore it. Though I was uncomfortable, I had to squarely deal with whatever it was. And things seemed strange right away when I got to the house. Olivia was behaving as though everything were quite normal. It wasn't the tight, uncomfortable atmosphere I anticipated following a divorce. Rather, she was laughing with my dad, and he was treating her as though she were still his daughter-in-law. That felt like a slap in the face. My sister Emma drew me away as the evening wore on. All evening she had been acting unusually. I sensed something was weighing on her. She told me once we were alone that she had overheard certain talks between my dad and Olivia during the past few months. Still in touch, they spoke on the phone often. Emma had even heard bits of their chats. The first crack in the facade was that one. It lacked logic. Given everything seemed to be amicable, why was my dad still corresponding with Olivia following the divorce? Things descended into a mess later that evening. I heard Olivia and my dad chatting in the kitchen. Though I was standing just outside the door and could hear them well, they thought nobody was present. Olivia remarked, "You don't need to tell him anything, just keep things the way they are." My dad's voice, calm but with an undertone of something evil, answered, "I know what's best for him. He would understand finally." That was the instant my stomach started to hurt. This went beyond a family get-together. This was something far more expansive. Every bit I knew about my family was beginning to fall apart. The next few days following the Christmas celebration seemed dreamlike. I kept going back over the overheard exchange between Olivia and my dad. It was the tone rather than only the words that tormented me. My dad had sounded just too assured, too serene. That was not his manner of speaking. He constantly told me that blood was thicker than water and was the one who put family before anything else. Why then did he sound as though he was hiding something so massive from me? It did not sit correctly. As I considered it, additional things didn't fit together. Olivia's abrupt absence following the divorce, the big sum of money she had acquired, and my dad's peculiar behavior, all of which suggested something far more evil than I was ready to acknowledge. I resolved I couldn't let it pass anymore. I owed it to him to face her. I wanted responses even if they hurt. Under the guise of delivering some items, I visited my parents' residence a few days following Christmas. Actually, though, I had one question I wanted to ask my dad. What the devil was happening? Emma verified when I spoke with her once more that she had overheard more exchanges between him and Olivia. Their relationship clearly had more than simply a pleasant post-divorce link, and I couldn't get rid of the sense that my dad participated in the disintegration of my marriage in ways I hadn't even thought about. My mom was in the kitchen when I got to my parents' house. Da was reading the newspaper from his preferred recliner. Sitting next to him, I inquired haphazardly how things had been going. Before we started the actual chat, I wanted to feel his attitude. With an edge in his smile, as if he were trying to persuade himself of it, my dad answered normally about life being good. I could no longer stand it. I stammered, "Dad, I have to know. Why is Olivia still in touch with you? Why are you behaving as though everything between you two is in order? Whose behavior is this?" It was quiet for a minute. I observed as my dad's face turned from serene to awkward. His fingers stopped on the newspaper, and his eyes veered off toward me. He seemed not expecting me to approach him so squarely. Before responding, he stopped for some time. "I'm just trying to help her out. Ethan, she has gone through a lot. You are not understanding." That was not the whole truth, as I knew. It was about something more than only aiding Olivia. I did not, however, press him right then. Rather, I said I would talk to him later and chose to go. I had to compile more data to grasp exactly what had transpired. That evening, following dinner, I was by myself in my room reviewing some of the divorce documents. I wanted to know everything that had happened, every nuance. Looking over the papers, I came upon something that made my blood stop cold, plain as day. Right about the time Olivia filed for divorce, a sizable amount of money had been transferred from my father's business account into Olivia's account. When we divided, the total was exactly what she had taken. What I was seeing seemed unbelievable, unquestionably was true. My dad had handed her cash. Yet why? I grabbed the phone and dialed Olivia. I waited for her to pick up, and my heart was pounding. When she did finally respond, I let go. "Olivia, what the devil is happening? Why would you have taken money from my dad? Why did he pay you to walk away from me? I'm done with the falsehoods. I need answers." On the other side of the line, there was an extended stop. She said nothing, but I could hear her breath hesitating. She spoke at last, and her voice hardly raised above a whisper. "Ethan, I never wanted any of this. Your father, he attacked my line of work. If I objected to the divorce terms, he warned he would destroy all I have worked for. He said he understood what was best for you, that I was holding you back, that you weren't going anywhere with me around. I had no choice. He made that abundantly evident." My stomach sank. I thought of myself as having been struck in the chest. Every belief I had about Olivia, about my family, was falling apart around me. Olivia was a pawn, controlled by my father, the one person Olivia most trusted in the world. She was not the villain in this narrative. I asked her whether she was merely trying to defend her behavior or whether she was lying. But her voice, her subdued misery, told me just what I needed to know. She was not fabricating. Her father had been threatened by my dad. He had shaped both of us. My hands quivering, I hung up the phone. I found it difficult to breathe. Though I knew that would solve nothing, I wanted to yell and shatter something. I had to go face first with Dad. I had to arrive at the truth. I stayed awake that evening instead. I sat up considering everything. About Olivia's confession, about the money, about my dad's words. He had made it abundantly evident that he believed he was acting in my best interests. But suddenly I realized he was trying to run my life, run my marriage, and decide my destiny. That was unacceptable. I found it intolerable at last. Every day, the persistent sensation in the rear of my brain got louder. Though it meant I had to confront something I wasn't ready to hear, I wanted the truth. Under the guise of returning some items to my mother, I headed to my parents' house the following morning. Though I had no clear idea what I was looking for, I had to look. Something felt off. Trying to be laid back, I entered the kitchen. But every inch of the home seemed to be observing me as though the walls themselves were keeping something from me. My dad was in the kitchen. My mom was in the living room. He was being somewhat too normal, which only made me more dubious. Pretending to be sidetracked by something on the counter, I passed him when I came upon a stack of papers on the kitchen table that I had not seen previously. I initially assumed they were simply old bills or something meaningless, but then I noticed the familiar terms. Divorce settlement. I still went. My heart began to pick up speed. Here it was. I had been dodging this for so long. I touched the papers later on. I turned away, attempting to seem as though nothing had drawn my eye. First, I had to relax my nerves, but I knew what to do next. I needed to discover what was happening. After acting, everything was good. A few hours later, I informed my mother I had to go after forgetting some paperwork at home. But I was not leaving empty-handed this time. I had created a justification to get outside and reached for the stack of papers. Though I felt as though the truth was clear in front of me, I felt as though I was betraying my family. Returning home, I locked myself in my office and started poring over the records. The first page reflected what I had anticipated, details of our divorce settlement. My hands began to shake, though, as I continued reading. Reading more helped me to comprehend the terrible reality. Olivia received a sizable amount, but it was not a settlement payment just. It came from the personal business account of my father, an enormous chunk of money, far more than she would have been entitled to during the divorce. This was not a normal divorce payback. This was something else quite different. My head was whirling. Why would Dad participate in this? Why would he pay Olivia to part from me? The next piece of the jigsaw came together when I discovered a note penned by my father personally in the records. The basic message was, "I'm doing this for his future. You must keep this quiet." That was it. The instant everything started to click. Though I knew I had to face my father, I wasn't sure how to go about it. How could I ask him straight about something this important without forfeiting it all? The reality, nevertheless, was already indisputable. I needed to understand his motivation. Under what logic was he acting? Why would he undermine my life in this way? Though I kept it under control, the rage began to gather within me. I would face him only when I felt ready. I phoned Olivia later that evening. Though I had no idea what to expect, I had to hear from her. My hands shaking, I phoned her. She picked up after a few rings, her voice seeming reluctant and nearly apologetic. "Ethan?" she asked, as though unsure of how to react to me anymore. I wasted no time on politeness. "Olivia, I am knowledgeable in everything. Didn't your father pay you to leave me?" There was a lengthy stop. Her choking on her words was almost audible, and I was trying to figure out how to react. She at last acknowledged it. "Ethan indeed did. His pay for me to leave you sank me." She continued, though her voice was softer now. "Still, it was not only about money. He intimidated me. Should I refuse the divorce? He warned he will destroy my career." There was no decision left to me. I stunned myself. How could the guy I had looked up to all my life do something so horrible? My father? And to Olivia, formerly someone I loved, no less. My head felt like a blur. I became unsure of what to believe or feel going forward. One thing, though, I knew for sure. My father had shaped my marriage, my father, and my future in a way I never could have predicted. My hands still shaking, my chest tense with rage, I hung off the line. One thing, though, I knew was I had to face my father. I couldn't let him get away with this. I had to insist on explanations. I visited my parents straight away the next day. I was not going to let him fool me going forward. I had to personally hear the truth straight from him. Dad was seated across from me in the living room. Tension permeated the space separating us. He was ignorant of what I knew. I uttered no words at all. I just sat there staring at him. At last, he spoke out against the quiet. "What's going on, Ethan? You have been far off recently." His voice sounded cool, as though he were trying to portray the worried father. I was not, however, purchasing it. I slanted forward to meet his gaze. "I understand what you did, Dad. I know you paid Olivia to split from me. Just why? Your thoughts?" His face went white, and his posture stiffened. I watched terror flutter across his features for a second, but he soon covered it. "Ethan," he said, his voice low and nearly comforting, "you do not grasp. I worked on it for you. I did it for your best interest. What I was hearing defied belief. You consider this to be the best. Devastating my marriage and life. For what? What did this help you to learn?" Leaning back, he turned away as if trying to find the correct words. At last he spoke, and his voice was quite cold. "I assumed she was stifling you. Without her, you seemed better off. You seemed unprepared for the life I have in store for you." Such was it. I had enough hearing. Rising, my blood boiling and my fists tight. "You supposed to know it would be best for me? You wrecked everything, my marriage, my existence. This is not pardonable." My heart laden with treachery, I left. The man I imagined my father was not the one I met. And Olivia, well, she stumbled into the center of an activity he never wanted to engage in. This did not end. I was going to let my father off with this. Clearly, though, nothing would ever be the same once more. I lost it in more recent times. I had to face it, even though the bits of the puzzle were beginning to come together in a way I wanted not to admit. Too much to overlook. The secrets, the lies. I inhaled deeply and then chose to face my father. I yearned for the truth. I needed to understand why he had turned on me in this manner. My heart thumping in my chest, I was outside my parents' house the following day, standing at the door. I had to ask, even though I had no idea how the chat would turn out. I knocked, and when my father opened the door, His expression displayed a mix of astonishment and discomfort right away. I didn't care. He most likely felt something was off. This was exactly what had to happen. I didn't spend time chatting small-mindedly. I came straight in and sat down, fully staring him in the eyes. "We need to talk," I began, my voice firm but weighted with all I had been holding in for weeks. My dad seemed shocked. "Around what?" His tone was defensive as he asked, "About you and Olivia," I added honestly. "You have been in touch with her, I know. I listened to your talks." His face turned white and I could sense shame in his eyes, but he tried to hide it. "Why, Dad? Why would you treat me thus? Why would you support her leaving me? Why did you keep from me the truth?" He avoided my view by shifting uneasily in his chair. The quiet lingered thick between us for a minute. He sighed at last, a deep, resigned sound, and said, "You do not grasp, Ethan. I behaved as I felt would be best for you. She was not right for you. You were being held back by her. I could feel my blood boiling. Holding me back? How would you do it?" Your ignorance of what was actually happening in my marriage caused my voice to break, but I forced it to remain steady. "You understood what was better for me than I did. Hence, you have always treated me as though I could not make my own decisions. Why did you think you should intervene?" He didn't reply straight away, but I could see his eyes darting, as though he was looking for the correct words, that which would make this all logical. At last he spoke once more, but his voice was softer and more faintly regretful. "I paid Olivia to leave you." I froze. The planet seemed to be whirling, and the words I had been fearing were now freely available. "Paid her to walk away from me?" Beyond anything I could have imagined, the treachery was. My gut turned with incredulity, and I needed several deep breaths to gather what he had stated. "What? You paid her? What then do you mean?" I asked, just able to get the words out. He stared at me, his face weighed with something I couldn't quite identify. Shame, guilt, maybe even fury. "I handed her money to head out. I wanted you to stop wasting time with someone unworthy of you. Ethan, you exceeded her in every way. Without her, I reasoned you would be happier." What I was hearing seemed unbelievable. "You didn't think I deserved to make my own decisions, did you?" The man who had been my father, the one I trusted, the one who had always taught me family comes first. He had manipulated me, wrecked my marriage, then justified it by saying he was protecting me. "You doubted I could choose what would be best for myself." Almost begging, as if he wanted me to grasp, he replied, "I did what I thought was right." She had a negative influence. Not the one for you, was she? Inside me, my wrath blazed hotter. I got up, fists tightly closed. "For me, you have no say on it. You are not here to make those decisions for me," I yelled, my voice shaky with fury. "And you sure as hell don't get to tear apart my life because you think you know what's best for me." Rising as well, he gestured defensively with his hands. "Ethan, cool yourself. I had no intention of it happening this way. I wanted to simply assist you. One day I reasoned you would be grateful." "Thankful?" I laughed, shaking my head incredulously. "Dad, I will never feel appreciative of this. You wreck everything. In ways I cannot even begin to characterize. You have betrayed me." He went silent. Rather, he bowed his head, away from my view. Now I could feel the guilt and regret in his eyes, but it was too late. Already the damage had been done. Nevertheless, there was more. I had not yet finished. Olivia also wanted to know that I wouldn't be letting her off the hook either. I got in touch with her. She had to tell me personally the truth, that she had been hiding from me. Her voice was hesitant as she answered the phone, realizing it was me. "Ethan," she started gently, as if not sure how to start the call. "Olivia," I said, my voice calm but tinged with rage. "I know what happened. I know Dad paid you to go abandon me." On the other end of the line, there was a protracted stop. She started, "Ethan, but I cut her off. "Don't even try to reject it. I have heard it all. I am interested in the truth." "He threatened you with what? How else may he have made you go away?" She sighed, and I could hear her voice growing tired. "Ethan, I had no decision at all. Your dad threatened to dash my career. He stated he would see to it that, should I reject the divorce, I never worked again. There was no choice for me. I got caught." Stunned in silence, I stood there and felt her words weigh down. To control mine, my father had wrecked her life as much as he manipulated me. Her voice a little above a whisper, she said, "I didn't want to hurt you. Still, I had no choices. I apologize. The apologies had no bearing on things. Damage had already been done. What I had discovered weighed nearly too much to handle. The man I had looked up to, the man who had been my rock, had planned my divorce such that all I had ever known about family loyalty was totally destroyed. The insight struck me like a truck, and all I could think about was the suffering Olivia and my father had caused, not only to me, but also to her. I understood I had to stop this. I went to face him. I had to tell the truth regardless of the consequences. I was not going to do it, though, by myself. From the start, my younger sister Claire had been dubious about Dad's involvement. Now she was right at hand. That evening, I gave her a call asking her to visit. I told her I had found the truth about everything, about the money, the threats, and how Dad had been central in all of it. Claire had clearly been considering the matter when she came. She had always been the more sensitive member of the family, and I could sense she shared my feelings of disgust at our father's behavior. Her voice quivering with passion, she added, "I knew something was off. I simply didn't want to accept it, but right now, everything is reasonable. Has he not been dictating everything that each of us does?" I answered by nodding. "And he still is doing it? Though he has been ruining everything in his way, he believes he knows what is best for us." It is time we confronted his act's results. We decided that we had to have a family meeting, a confrontation meant to expose everything. I knew it would be messy, that accusations, tears, and disputes would abound. But I also knew that until my father saw just how far his treachery extended, I could not go on with my life. The following day, we compiled our proof, text messages, emails, audio recordings, everything we had that showed he had controlled Olivia and me. Claire had been subtle, gathering details from several family members who had observed odd behavior from Dad, but were unsure of what to make of it. Now it was time to present my own collection of proof, which I had. We gathered the family, my mom, aunt, uncles, and a few close friends we knew we could trust. I sensed the stress in the air as everyone settled into the living room. Though I had no idea what to expect, I knew this would mark a sea change for everything. Dad looked about and obviously sensed something was wrong when he first arrived. There was no little chat or informal welcome. I straightforwardly chopped right to the core. "Dad, we understand what you did. We know you bribed Olivia to leave me and that you threatened her to make her do it. This comes to an end today." His face stiffened, and for the first time in my life, I saw him actually furious. He sipped and got to his feet. "You are incorrect. I did what I had to do to guard you. You were too blind to understand Olivia wasn't good enough for you. She was slowing you down, Ethan. She was never going to enable your success. I behaved like any father would have done." What I was hearing defied belief. Actually, he thought this would benefit me personally. He really believed that ending my marriage would shield me. My voice grew as I pulled back, my chest constricting. "Dad, you are not here to make those choices for me. You had no right to pull apart my life. Olivia was not ideal, yet I chose her, not yours." Emily spoke up at that, her voice little but forceful. Quietly entering the room, she stood at the doorway. "Ethan's right," she remarked softly. "I never wanted to treat him badly, but there was no option for me. Your dad put threats on Ethan. If I strayed from his plan, he warned me he would ruin everything for me." The room was still silent. Everything seemed to have stopped just momentarily. The look of my father changed from wrath to incredulity. His voice quivering now, he added, "Olivia, you're lying." Her eyes shining with tears, she said, "I'm not lying. I never wanted to part with him. I cared about him. Your threats, nevertheless, were too numerous. I had to follow it without an option." I watched the way my dad's countenance flicked. Briefly, just for a second. Deep down, he knew Emily's words were accurate, but his pride would keep him from owning it. Claire stepped up with a trembling but determined voice. "You believe you know exactly what everyone needs. Dad, you have always behaved in this way. You have always aimed to run every aspect of our life. Still, you have passed a line this time. Everyone who has ever loved you now trusts you less." My father's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his deeds was at last beginning to set in. But then he tried to save his place in line with convention. "I did it, Ethan, because I love you. I wanted you to avoid choosing the incorrect path and lead a life not very successful." "Successful?" I nearly burst out laughing at how ridiculous it was. "Dad, you have no say as to what success means to me. Your approval or what you believe I should do has little bearing on how I live. I am a man of grown years. I know the road I should travel. The conference ran for several hours. While some family members agreed with my dad, others, including a handful of his closest friends, supported Claire and me. Though everyone had ideas about what would be best for me, it soon became evident that my father had contrived the circumstances to split the family. While some saw the truth for what it was, a control strategy, others wanted to think he was merely looking out for me. Eventually, it was not about winning or losing. It was not about persuading my dad to atone. It was about speaking for Olivia and me. I could not allow this to continue anymore. The family conference revealed open wounds I had not even known I possessed. Still, it had also been a required cleanse, in an odd sense. I finally realized just how far my father's influence extended. Looking up to him, trusting him with everything, I had spent my whole life, but I could not undo the reality now. He was a manipulator, a puppeteer dragging the strings of everyone around him, including me, not only a father. That confrontation left almost as much suffering as the disclosure itself. While some family members supported Dad, still unwilling to accept the truth, others, including some of his closest friends, gathered around me, consoling me. It was about a broken family, not only about me now. The once close-knit group had been broken beyond recovery, and no matter how hard we tried, our distance felt permanent. But at last Olivia and I had the opportunity for healing. Not precisely. She and I hadn't actually spoken since the divorce. There had always been too much hurt and too much misunderstanding between us. But now it was different. The truth shone clear-cut. Lying or manipulation no longer bound us. Olivia was no longer the woman I had left behind due to an uncontrollable factor. She no longer fell prey to the game my father constructed. Only if we so choose could we rebuild. Things were first somewhat tense. Sometimes neither of us knew what to say. It was embarrassing, almost as though we were strangers once more. Still, we began to open more gradually. We worked on the suffering each of us had experienced. Olivia was sorry for leaving, but I no longer wanted to hang on to the wrath. I wanted no punishment for her. She has been as much a victim of my father as I have been, I realized, and I forgave her, though it meant I was no longer ready to bear the weight of anger with me. Forgiveness did not entail forgetting. We began to see one another more and developed a fresh bond over time. Though it wasn't flawless and it happened overnight, it was true. Though we both had been wronged in separate ways, there was a silent knowledge between us that we neither had to continue battling. Knowing that we could both move on, individually but together, in our own way, brought some sort of serenity. Claire also had turned into my rock. Though we had always been close, the events of the last few months had pulled us even closer. From the beginning, she has been my friend. I could not have done it without her. She struggled with our father personally, but unlike me, she had been able to distance herself early. Seeing her stand by my side, relentless, helped me to understand her strength. She was my grounding agent, my voice of reason when things seemed to be spiraling out of hand. Regarding my father, nothing was going to be the same. The damage had been done. He could not reverse the significant repercussions of his conduct. His guilt about his manipulation loomed over him like a black cloud. He could no more pass for the wise, all-powerful being guiding our life. The family saw him for who he really was, and I knew deep down, he knew. He had not apologized, not even come close. Rather, he had turned even farther inside his shell and rejected the truth. The worst aspect was that I couldn't help but feel some residual remorse even though I had freed him and exposed him. The part of me that had previously idolized him still yearned he would come around and wanted some sort of regret, some shred of humanity. That was not, however, who he was. He was not going to evolve. And even if I yearned to believe in the guy he had once been, I knew I could not keep living that lie. Dad withdrew more after the confrontation. He cut himself apart from the family, and most of his supposed buddies vanished. Years of carefully tending to his support system gradually collapsed all around him. I observed from far away as the weeks stretched into months. Not now. I cannot say I felt sympathy for him. He had done it to Olivia, to me, to our family. Unforgivable. But I also felt a sliver of melancholy for the guy he had evolved into. Just as much as it had devastated all around him, the control he so desperately clung to had wrecked him. With time, I came to find inner serenity. Though I could not fix the family or the past, I could influence my future. I might design a life free from the shadow of manipulation, mine and mine alone. I quit thinking about whether I had made my father proud and stopped looking for his approval, since his acceptance had always come with a cost ultimately, a price I could not afford anymore. I moved to a new city, far from the traces of my former life to allow me to really begin again. The fresh start was more important than the change of landscape. It was the chance to live on my terms, free from the weight of my father's expectations. I met fresh individuals, grew friends, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. I felt deserving without anyone's permission. I was plenty, exactly as I was. I eventually got in touch with some distant cousins, folks who had heard about the event but hadn't participated in the drama. We began to establish bonds on our own, free from my father's intervention. It seemed to be a real healing process, slow and consistent. Past expectations or power games did not define us. We may simply be ourselves. Regarding Olivia, she also proceeded with her life. Though we stayed in touch, our relationship changed. Both of us knew from the past that the future was something we had to design for ourselves. Though it was sad, there was also a release. Each of us had discovered serenity in different ways. Though my road was not finished, I had traveled a great distance. Having at last emerged from under the shadow of my father, I had discovered that I was not satisfied depending on his approval. I was resolved to make the future my own since it was mine to mold. Letting go of the past can sometimes be the toughest thing, I thought. Still, the weight you have been carrying vanishes once you do. You can then really breathe for the first time. I then followed,